Okay, so good morning. If y'all don't know me, my name's Josh Hone. We're teaching a class on how to be a peacemaker this morning. That is something that is a practical skill. We've got tons of motivation for this, and I'm just going to recap it like I do every week, what we've gone on before. I don't think we will finish. We will finish avoiding conflict today. We've been on this lesson for 3 weeks, and we're going to finish it today. And then next week we will get on to how to deal with conflict, when you're in it. But this week we're talking about how to avoid conflict. Why do we want to build this skill? Well, just like all of these Beatitudes here, Jesus, somebody saying something? Okay. Kind of talked about like what are the purposes of the Beatitudes? Why does Jesus give us these, kind of starting from this in Matthew 5 and realizing, well, this isn't just saying, hey, if you happen to be this, here's a good thing for you. If you happen to be that, here's a good thing for you. They're aspirational. He's calling us to build skills in all of these areas. And the one that, intimidated me for a long time is how to be a peacemaker. When he says be a peacemaker and you're a child of God, what does that mean? Why? How do we do that? It just seems like something that you either have it or you don't. But there's a lot of motivations for us. There's a lot of scripture that talks about this. We want to avoid conflicts, easily breaking relationships in the church. We want to have many people in the church who are peacemakers because we need a lot of peacemaking to happen. Calvin, did Jackie just have too much birthday yesterday? Is that what's going on? Too much birthday. We need to be able to agree to disagree in the church. There's lots of things that are just judgment calls, right, that we make. And we need to be able to distinguish that and know what are things that we can stand firm on and what are things that we can agree to disagree about. We need to, like I was talking about earlier, Concord, in the time that I've been here, almost 20 years, we have not, had a lot of conflict, but discussing conflict resolution and peacemaking is a good inoculation against that. That's good to get ahead of it. We talked a lot, about different situations that can cause conflict in the church. One that we might be talking about today in that elders talk is maybe we move buildings, right? And if I can find you, 3 different stories where churches split over the color of a carpet, then I can tell you that finding a new building could be an area of conflict for us. But if we can become peacemakers, and understand how to settle conflicts among each other, then a big change like that might not really do us too much damage. One of the ones that I had not talked about, but I'll talk about this morning, is being a peacemaker is a leadership characteristic. You think about the people in your life that do this. This is an aspect of leadership, and of course, that's one of our themes for the upcoming year. We need to develop leadership characteristics and leaders in the church. Being a peacemaker is something that it kind of requires these peacemaking skills. You can think of who settles conflicts for you at work. A lot of the times it's, you have to go to your managers, you have to go to the people who are in your leadership positions to do that. In your family, the same thing. Your children are probably not the peacemakers, it's got to be the parents, right? And in your marriages, you've got to have peacemakers because you're going to have conflicts with the people that you're around a lot. So it's a leadership skill that's something that's a really big driver for this. Okay, and to just quickly sum up what we have done in the past, we as Christian peacemakers, we pursue conflict resolution with urgency. We don't let things just sit. We don't let little things become big things, but we value peace enough to take on the initial discomfort that comes with, dealing with something that you maybe wouldn't rather deal with, but we do it urgently, and we do it with kind of like valuing and kind of looking ahead to understand how bad it is when that peace gets broken. I think unfortunately, we're in a time where it feels like war might break out. There's lots of conflicts around the world, and one thing that I heard recently was it's easy to start a war and hard to end one. Well, conflicts are that way too. Conflicts between people, it's easy to start one, but it can be really hard to end one. We talked about being reserved and just, it's not an honor to be engaging in arguments and winning them or something like that, but it's better to be, it's better to be, to keeping yourself aloof from strife if you can. It's good to be hands-off, so not involving yourself in someone else's arguments all the time. Like we're always around people. That means we're always around other people's business, but that doesn't mean that I need to be in your business all the time, right? Now, that doesn't mean that you won't ever get involved, but you need to be invited in to something like that. We don't need to be provoking others, and that was something we talked about, like parents and children. Husbands kind of provoke their wives because they get cute when they get mad sometimes. I don't know, that's just me. But we don't need to be provoking things. And we also talked about, don't joke too much. There's a proverb about, don't joke too much with that. Avoid evil friends. So that's something that can really strongly affect your relationships with others. The conflict that you get in is being around your friends and going with them instead of influencing them. Empathy is really important for a Christian peacemaker. If you can put yourself in someone else's shoes, you can understand what they're thinking, what they value, then you can avoid conflict with them. You understand what's important to them. And kind of along with this empathy, I wanted to stop here. Foresight, but foresight has an aspect of wisdom. I wanted to stop and kind of talk about, how does wisdom help you avoid conflict? This is something we didn't really get into last week. But where foresight kind of has you looking ahead, looking at the dangers. In the business world, we have this phrase like, can you see around corners? Can you know what the problem is, even though you haven't gotten there yet, maybe because you've been there before, or maybe because you can understand where something is going. There's an aspect of wisdom to foresight that I want us to stop and talk about. Like, what aspects of wisdom are important to avoiding conflict? Does anybody have like a definition? If you were to define wisdom, what would you say wisdom is?
Prudent use of knowledge.
Okay. Hold on, we had somebody with a mic. Go ahead.
Prudent use of knowledge.
Prudent use of knowledge. So you actually go out of your way to study things, right? A lot of the times if you're going to use your knowledge in a good way, first you got to have it, right? So the first part of prudent use of knowledge is, do you have it? There's a proverb about the wise studies to show himself, and that is something that is, I think, really important in being a peacemaker, is just general education, general knowledge, just general finding out about how different people work. What else is important? Like what is important about wisdom to help us avoid conflict? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, with wisdom, it's knowledge that you've gained over time through experience, and so the key there is knowing how and when to apply it. Mm-hmm. As far as things like this conversation we're having now.
Yeah, how and when to apply it. That's something we've also talked about. None of these tactics are things you're going to do 100% of the time. You're always going to be selectively figuring out, when do I do this, when do I do that. And a lot of the time with wisdom comes a story, right? That if you have to talk or settle something with yourself or with your spouse or with somebody else, you have something to just say, well, it's not just my opinion. It's not just something that I'm saying, but let me tell you about this time when I'm either glad I didn't do that, or I did that, and here's what happened. A lot of time wisdom comes with a story to help you know when to apply it. What else? What else is good about wisdom to help us avoid conflicts? I'm sure, think about your job. Everybody in your job, you become more skilled, right? But that also kind of builds your experience, but it also builds your sense of, hey, there's trouble over there, I don't want to do that. Does anybody have any stories like that? Maybe something that you did in your job when you first got started out that you wouldn't do now? Things that you got trained to do? Be a little practical about it.
One thing about wisdom is as you grow older, usually you become more wise, and the reason that is because of history. History is very important to wisdom. I could dare say that if you have no history or very little history, you have very little wisdom, because you learn, if you're wise, you learn from your mistakes and from the mistakes of others. You don't have to do it yourself and find out. You can look at others and learn from their mistakes as well, so that you know what to do. And the beginning of wisdom is the Word of God. That's the beginning of wisdom.
You know, one thing that your comment just kind of triggered in my thinking is when you gain wisdom, one of the things you learn is you learn how to value things. You know, I can remember valuing certain things when I was younger and not valuing things that other people would value. And as I get older, now I start to understand, okay, they value that a lot more. And so I should have that same value for them. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I say wisdom is knowing when to speak, knowing when to not speak, knowing when to walk away, and that's the wisdom to keep from getting things going further and further. So that's what I would do, you know, that's what I've experienced before. The more you speak, talk, and you got to be able to know what tone you use, not to really get in an argument, and just let it go. You know, if it's that come to that, then you just walk away.
You know, it sounds a lot like cooking. You know, so you have to weigh, when you're making a new recipe, you have to weigh how much of this do I put in, how much of that do I put in, how long do I cook it for, you know. You learn, part of wisdom is learning how to weigh things and balance things, and learning, you know, what's the right combinations and what's the right combination for you. Like, what are you very effective in? So when I taught this class in the youth, some people were very onto like honesty as a solution for conflict. Like, just be honest, just be open, just be transparent, just get everything out there and just say everything. And it was even to the point where like they wanted to be honest about things that people really aren't going to be honest about, like things that people are really going to be more discretionary about. But that was how that worked for them, you know, and they had, you know, built that up, and that's how they solved their problem. Other people are going to approach and have success in problem solving in a whole different way. That's really why I want this class to be so comment oriented, because I feel like we can learn a lot from each other about this. Such a practical skill is going to take, you know, us understanding what builds for success. I think we had another comment over here. Yep.
I was just looking up the definition, and this is a biblical definition of wisdom. It says God-given ability to apply knowledge and understanding with sound judgment, discernment, and righteousness, leading to a life that honors God and aligns with His will. So sometimes we have to look at things from a biblical, from God's perspective. Okay. And I like the comment when you made about being honest, but sometimes we have to use discernment and when to say certain things in the way that we say it, like Brother Willie was saying just a moment ago. Sometimes you can't just say things at a certain time. You have to decide when it's the time to say something and when it's the time to not say something.
Mm-hmm. Solomon has a lot of those things, right? It's a time, like all of his times and seasons, right? It's a time to plant, it's a time to harvest. You know, there's just different times that you kind of recognize when it is good to do certain things. Yeah.
As I was a speech teacher for 35 years, and to me, one of the most important things is think before you speak. And people just seem to forget that when they start to speak a lot. So, to me, that's one of the first things you got to remember, is speak, think before you speak, and then hopefully everything will smooth out.
So let's take this for instance. Let's take this from a Bible story. One of the famous stories about wisdom is Solomon judging the two women, right? I think we can see a lot of aspects of wisdom in how to, basically that's dealing with conflict, but he's also trying to avoid a further conflict, right? He's got to get this settled, you know. He can't just settle this where the other woman is really going to keep coming after that baby, right? He has to get it settled. It has to be something. So what do you see in that? You know, the wisdom of Solomon guiding that decision. I mean, he clearly understood, like what we were talking about earlier, the value of things, right? Who values what? A woman who is falsely claiming to have a child is not going to value the life of that child as much as the mother would, right? He understands that value, right? He also understands, with his wisdom, he seems to understand that basically that this is something that needs to be dealt with, I would say, urgently or finally, right? He needs to come up with something that is just once and for all going to settle the issue. Like, you don't want to have this child and his whole life be determined by how this conflict, you know, either plays out or doesn't play out, right? What else do we see in that? Like, what impresses you about Solomon's decision there? That story with the baby. What about wisdom can we learn about settling and avoiding conflict? I would say there's some empathy there, right? Solomon's not a woman, he's never given birth, but he makes that decision like really understanding how a woman feels about her child, right? So there's some good empathy in there that Solomon displays. Like he really understands, like, this is going to be the key to unlock this problem. What else? What else do you think? Where'd Scott go? Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say the wisdom only came from God, because I wouldn't have known what to do at that particular moment. So I'm thinking, we have a problem. The first thing we need to do is go to God in prayer, and I believe He will give us the answer. It's
intimidating, right? That whole story is intimidating. That's one of my main examples. Like Solomon doing that. We had Calvin up here, Scott. And then Jesus also giving that quick answer about the taxes, render under Caesar, what is Caesar's, render under God, what is God's. That's pretty intimidating. You know, I feel like I can't follow that one. You know, I can't do that in my own life. But that's clearly something that's also guided by wisdom. That's Jesus knowing the hearts of men. That's Jesus knowing the purposes that those taxes are here for, and the justice that they need to support in the government, right? There's a lot of things that he's weighing. Yeah, go ahead, Calvin.
We have to remember that at the very beginning, Solomon asked God for wisdom. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just Solomon acting on his own.
Right.
God had blessed him with this wisdom to understand the love of a mother and empathize with the love of a mother and know these basic principles of humanity.
Yep.
That a mother is not going to do anything ever to endanger her child, even if it means giving up the child.
And do you remember what his motivation was? Why did he ask for wisdom? What did he say?
To lead your people.
To lead your people. So justice is really important, right? Wisdom, like I remember when I was in high school debate, you study philosophers, and the debate topics were so often centered on justice. And there's so many philosophers that have had their own views of justice. You know, you have Rawlsian justice, you have Hobbes, you have Rousseau had a take on justice, you had Kantian justice, the categorical imperative. There's a lot of theories about justice. Justice is something that can be very hard to understand, and it's worth your own study and your own thought, you know, because guess what? Hey, as parents, we have to be just, right? As spouses of people, we have to be just. In our workplaces, we have to be just. In church leadership, we have to be just. Like, we have to, there's a wisdom that develops around the concept of justice. Okay, any other thoughts about that? Be wise and avoid conflict. Not just talking about don't forget your wife's birthday or your anniversary, okay? Like that's way deeper than that. Okay, we talked about forgiveness. I feel like we did cover that one at the end. Here's a new one that we did not cover last week. This is, I think, I have one more. This is close to the end of the direct ways to avoid conflict, and that is sobriety. Sobriety. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 1. This is a very famous verse. Everybody has probably seen this, right? Wine is a mocker, strong drink is a brawler. Whoever is led astray by it is not wise. Okay, you probably have seen this in your own, like at times the conversation comes up, should a Christian drink? What should be our attitude towards alcohol? But I noticed something about this, that this phrase, I hope you notice, is phrased in terms of peacemaking. Did you see that? It's talking about conflict. What does alcohol do? You cause conflict with your mouth, you're mocking. You cause conflict with your actions, you're brawling. Okay? That's a big part of it. And so sobriety, as a Christian, is a great way to be a peacemaker, because insobriety causes conflict. That's what this verse is calling out here. Okay? This is really interesting to kind of like look back through the Bible and at different stories and things, and look at aspects of how peacemaking is actually invested in this. But yeah, wine is a mocker, strong drink is a brawler. Sobriety is so much conflict can be avoided by avoiding intoxication. When I taught this in the jail, it was very different than when I taught this in the youth group. In the youth group, they didn't really have any stories or any experience about this. But let me tell you, something really interesting happened when I taught this in the jail. I have 60 inmates in the class. When I brought this up, so many people's face just got really quiet and still, okay? And I'm pretty sure I know why. Because if you have a person in your life that has a problem with this, that's no joke. That is something that a lot of people, especially a lot of people in jail, had people in their household who had trouble with staying sober. And when you have a problem with that, so much conflict comes into your house, because all of a sudden now somebody, a father, a mother who should be relied on, now you can't trust them. Okay? You especially when you're kind of like weak and helpless, you're growing up as a child in that house. Somebody that you need to be able to kind of like predict or understand what they're doing, this removes that. This has such an impact on something that it's so hard to imagine if you can't, if you haven't grown up like that. But man, this has such a huge impact, and not just on that, not just on what it does to your mood and your predictability and all that. The household finances get determined by this. Where's your money going? A lot of the time, it goes to drink because that's what somebody feel like they have to do, or that's what they want to do. Sobriety can help you avoid so much conflict. Christian peacemakers value that, not just for themselves, but for the environment around them. This is kind of a tough one to ask for stories about, but I mean, anybody have any stories that they want to talk about? Like how do you want to, like how you value this, or you've seen this cause conflict, or seen the removal of this remove conflict from situations? Yeah.
Yes, I've known people like you have a family and he's doing well a whole week until paycheck comes. And then he gets his money and he go take a drink. And the next thing you know, his bills behind, his family's going bad, and that's how a little bit too much will do for you. Once you get a sip and you get a habit to it, then it takes control of your life. So therefore, you run everything.
And there are so many different ways to do this now than what we had back then, and it affects so many different people in so many different ways, right? Not just alcohol, right? There's the whole meth family of drugs. There's the whole opioids family of drugs. It's different from the whole hallucinogen family of drug. Like, different people do those things. They cause different short-term effects. They cause different long-term effects to your health, right? People use these things for different reasons. They will stop for different reasons. They use them in different social settings. But this whole thing, has a serious impact on being a Christian peacemaker. That we have to be people who can be relied on as peacemakers avoid these kinds of things. Okay, one more that I wanted to talk about that I don't have a slide on is somebody turn over and read Proverbs chapter 16, verses 10 and 12. Proverbs 16, verse 10 and 12. I think it's Wesley. Wesley, do you want to get that one?
Yeah,
Hold on, let's go get over there.
Even though divination is on the lips of the king, his mouth must not transgress in judgment. A just weight and balance are the Lord's. All the weights in the bag are his work. It is an abomination for kings to commit wickedness, for a throne is established by righteousness.
Okay, the principle that I have here for avoiding conflict is we have to avoid misuse of authority. We have to avoid misuse of authority. We all have authority in certain situations. You know, parents have authority over their children. Heads of household have the authority in their house. At work, you can have authority. At church, you can be a leader and have authority. There's a strong theme that authority must not be misused. When that authority gets to be misused, a lot of conflict can happen, right? I can think of a few cases and a few times if that authority is misused, now all of a sudden it starts to be disregarded, right? Because it's disrespected. They're kind of doing things that people would find disrespectful or things that are not fitting for authority, and then that starts to degrade basically what that authority is valued at in other people's eyes, okay? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry to make you walk so far. I noticed that this can be an issue. Well, I've seen it in the Church of Christ. I can't really speak much about other churches because I didn't grow up there. But growing up in the Church of Christ, sometimes you attend a congregation where there's an issue with leadership and unfair like justice, I guess, and
Okay.
how they solve problems and how they like to address those problems to the congregation. I'm not going to name names, but I used to attend a church where they would, you bring an issue up to the minister, and the minister would blast your information, not saying your name, but blast your information in front of a congregation inside of a sermon, and then try to make a point out of it, versus coming to you personally and trying to solve that issue. Or they may try to, but then they'll try to blast it and be like, oh, this is what you should and shouldn't do. And although there's a lesson in everything, I don't think that was the right way to go about it. There was a lot of questionable things that minister did, which I will not go into detail about, but that was one of the things that kind of stood out to me when reading this scripture.
We can misuse the information that people give us. See, y'all are doing this all the time. We're about to talk about that, okay? Just give me a minute and I'll get there, all right? We're about to talk about that. But yeah, we can misuse the information that people give us in authority. That's especially true in the church, right? We confide in our church leaders. That's one of those expectations of privacy, right? That we have, and really we should be like a peacemaker is someone who can be confided in, right? A peacemaker is somebody who you know is not going to take your situation and broadcast it, unduly. That's something that's a part of being trustworthy. That's a kind of an aspect of that. What else? What else is a way that, and I'm sure we can think of a lot of ways. I'm getting ahead of myself again, but one of our future classes is going to be how to be a peacemaker in your long-term relationships. In your long-term relationships, as a spouse, as a parent, you're going to pile up misuses of authority because you're human and you're going to make mistakes. But then the people still have to keep trusting you, right? So how does that work? That's tough. Somebody can just get sick of you making those mistakes and just stop listening to you. But yeah, misuse of authority is really important to avoid conflict. One thing, obviously, that we have to do is we have to keep respecting the trust and the charge that we've been given. Even after year after year after year after year after year of positions of leadership at work, in your family, in the church, you kind of need to still keep respecting that as though you just got that assignment yesterday. Like you have to never take it for granted is a way to say it, but it's more than that. It's like you have to have that same energy, that you have to be like, I'm so glad that someone has trusted me with this. I'm going to do my best. Even after 10 years, I'm going to still keep doing my best in this position. Yeah, go ahead.
I just had a comment that a good leader knows that mistakes are going to be made.
Yeah.
But they're going to own up to their mistake, take responsibility for it, apologize, and then make a concerted effort to not make that same mistake going forward. And people should be able to see them growing and doing better and taking their word that they are, turning around and not, striving to go down that wrong path again.
Yep.
That led to mistake.
I'll kind of come back to one of my earlier points. When Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God," keep in mind that all of these aspects of peacemaking are the ways that God keeps peace with you. And God certainly does not misuse his authority, although people will accuse him of that at times. They will, there's tons of places in Scripture, the Israelites in the wilderness, Job at times in his diatribes. He is not sure if God is being faithful with him, if he's treating him the way that he ought to be treated. And faithfulness is a strong aspect of this, that leaders, people who have authority, need to show ultimately that you respect where your authority came from, that you are faithful to the one who gave you that authority. And when people can see that in you, it's a lot easier for people to forgive your mistakes, right? Because it's a way to say, your heart is in the right place, but it's a way to say, I understand where my authority came from, and that I still am under someone else's authority, right? Yeah, we had another comment. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I listened to someone on television, and that's supposed to be everybody listening, and you're supposed to gather the truth from that. And the guy said, you talk about not drinking wine. That was the first thing Jesus made when he came to earth, when he was born up to be a real man,
Mm-hmm.
And he goes on to say, like, you should know how to control yourself, but the wine itself is not sin. I use the word sin because I can't remember every word he said. What I remember is, in that sense, Jesus introduced us how to drink and do it right.
Well, I'm not sure that when Jesus is making water into wine, he's taking a bunch of drunk people and getting them drunker. I don't think that, But we actually are going to talk about self-control here in a minute, so let's put a pin in that one. Hey, Clydine.
Hi. I'm very much against alcohol. I grew up as a child not ever being able to have any friends over, ever have a friend over at my house because my father drank, and he would work during the week, but every weekend my mother and I would run to our neighbor's house, and we went to Madison Church of Christ, and it was a really good church, and we would run and hide out at our neighbor's house, and different families from the church would come and take us in for the entire weekend, and so we could escape from my father, and they wouldn't let us know. He'd come and try to find us, but they wouldn't let him know where we were. And I remember that even his own family were scared to come and get us. And I lived that way my entire childhood, a teenage year, because of alcohol. And So I'm very much against alcohol.
Right, and I think the point that was made earlier is, you know, did I accidentally just click back to that? Okay, that happened in my pocket. But the point was made earlier is a Christian peacemaker being intoxicated, you're going to cause conflict. That's what this verse is telling you. You know, that's something that causes conflict with your words, causes conflict with your actions somehow. I mean, that's really why people do it. They do it so that they can suspend their judgment and have fun. And that's just not something that a Christian peacemaker can really do and keep the peace in their lives. You know, you do have a place for self-control, but I think for the most part, you know, your Christian peacemakers are not going to be people who are not relied on because of intoxication. Does that make sense? Okay, contentment. This is one of my favorite verses. I work this into every single lesson that I possibly can. Somebody turn over and Ecclesiastes chapter 4. Better is a handful of quietness than 2 hands full of toil and a striving after the wind. Now, somebody's probably got a better definition or like clearer translation of this, right? When you like try to put this into modern language, what do you kind of see here? Do we do this today? Do we say anything like this today? We kind of say something like this today. Yeah.
Let's see, a bird in the hand is worth 2.
Bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. Or I've got my hands full, right? I've got my hands full. When I say I've got my hands full, what do I mean? I'm so busy. I've got my 2 hands full. I can't take on anything else, right? I can't take on anything else because I've got my hands full. We probably don't think of this, but I love this image anyway. Can you actually, striving after the wind, can you chase the wind? No, why not? Because you can't see it, right? You don't know where it's coming from. You don't know where it's going. You can't chase the wind. It's a pointless activity, right? There's no point to that. But man, does this describe modern life. Man, does this describe modern life. Don't we get told, you are not living life right if you're not busy all the time, chasing everything that you can chase. If your life is not full of just like plenty of activity that all the things that you're supposed to be doing, and if you have kids, then there's like 5 more times more things that you're supposed to be doing. But like you're supposed to, I'll just give you a list. Maybe y'all can give me some more things that are on your list. You've got to go to work, but you've also got to get 8 hours of sleep, right? If you don't, you're not healthy, and so you're not doing it right. You've also got to eat healthy, which means like vegetables, not McDonald's. Okay, that's what they're talking about. They're looking at y'all McDonald's people and just trying to shake their fingers at you. But you also got to exercise, right? 5 times a week. You also need to keep your house clean and full of the latest Target furnishings. We have to do that. It has to change with the season. So I believe there's like 10 Target seasons, right? There's pre-Christmas, Halloween, Thanksgiving, spring, summer, Labor Day. I don't know, all the other holiday seasons that you got to keep your house decorated to. What else am I missing? Like there's tons of stuff that people want to cram into your life. But this verse says, and this is where we start, by the way, this is where we start the indirect conflict avoidance. This isn't directly avoiding conflict, but this is just doing this will avoid conflicts. We have to understand what God said about be content and have 1 handful. Because when you have 1 handful, now your other hand is free for all the random stuff that can come into your life. The kid problems that they come in and they need you to solve. The extra time and patience and energy you need to have to solve their disputes. Or to like deal with the last minute things that the kids bring up. Or that your spouse brings up. Or that work brings up. You have that extra hand free. And all of a sudden now you're not going to get stressed out by all those extra things that are going to come into your life anyway. Yeah, go ahead, Calvin.
Well, the world is full of deception and hypocrisy. Like you were talking about, we're supposed to eat healthy, in a healthy way, healthy food. We're not supposed to be eating McDonald's every day. But what do you have near every business area? a McDonald's and Burger King, but you don't have any restaurants serving broccoli and you know, baked chicken without the skin on it. You don't have any restaurants like that near where you work. So it's all hypocrisy. And then, you know, deception. You know, you're supposed to live the American dream, you know, but that American dream will drive you crazy chasing it if that's all you're chasing, you know. So it's all deception and hypocrisy.
Yeah, it's very materialistic. You reminded me of a few others. Did you know you're supposed to have your vitamins, the right vitamins and supplements? But you know what? You're also supposed to do all the research online so that you know which are the right vitamins that you're supposed to have and not take the wrong ones. The wrong ones can, and just like diets, they come in and every few weeks. There's the all-protein diet, there's the no-protein diet, there's all of that stuff. Oh, your clothes. Yep, absolutely. I'm so, like, Florida basically has one season, y'all. I'll wear shorts any time of the year. Any time of the year. Keep your clothes simple. Yeah.
You know, a lot of that contentment we can apply to being materialistic, as you just said, you know, trying to keep up with the Joneses, and, you know, that can lead you to the poorhouse. I was just looking at Proverbs 15:16 that says, better is a little. Proverbs 15:16 that says, better is little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure in trouble therewith.
Yep, that's right. That's right. I have to be content. That's right. And so think about how this applies to peacemaking, right? So not only does this keep you from getting worn out and stressed out, like people who have a lot of anxiety, people who have a lot of stress are going to not be so good as peacemakers, but you're also it's almost like you're inviting conflict into your life, you know. I feel for the parents who do what they call travel ball, you know. That's been a thing since I became a kid. I'll tell you my athletic experience. I played soccer until, you know, 5th grade or something. That was just local. Like we'd go. I don't think we probably had practices. I was not a good athlete at all. I played one season of baseball. They didn't really practice, or they would practice, but then they would change the times and I wouldn't go. So basically I played right field for half of the games. And then I think the whole season, I only played one season, I never even got my bat on the ball. I walked or struck out every single time. So I was not skilled athlete. But now you've got like travel ball where people are just like dedicating their whole lives to this, like their whole weekends, you know, are these year-round seasons where you want to have like this higher level of athletic competition. You pay for all this in the hopes that your kid can get a scholarship and all that. And man, I look at that and I'm like, I don't know how parents do it. It is going to run you ragged doing that. And I really don't know how people agreed to start doing that in the first place. Like people had to agree in large numbers to start doing that. But yeah, contentment is a really important thing. If you're going to be a peacemaker, you can't be loading up your life with things that are going to make you frazzled and wear you down, right? And you see that in Scripture too, like the concept of a Sabbath. There's going to be a break, right? In the Old Testament law, that there's a Sabbath day that's going to be a break in your day. You're not just going to keep pursuing gain. You know, that was what the real Sabbath injunction against work meant, right? Like, you don't work for gain, not like don't pick the grains like Jesus' disciples were accused of, but don't keep trying to enrich yourself 7 days a week, like have that never stop. You have to make it stop. Rest, you know, respect what God did. Okay. Contentment, great way to be a peacemaker. The next one, respect. Okay, respect. Whoever keeps his mouth and his tongue keeps himself out of trouble. There are so many scriptures we could talk about this, but respect in general is just something that keeps you on good terms with everybody. This is actually where self-control kind of comes in. I think my original title for this was self-control, but self-control has to do with like not just reacting. I think somebody else had the comment that you need to think before you speak, and that's a good part of being a peacemaker and keeping conflict, avoiding conflict. But the root of all of that is, you know, I'm still going to want to say what I want to say. What's going to keep my tongue in check, right? What's going to keep me from saying that? it's got to be my respect for others. Okay, so 1 Peter 2:17, honor all men. That's a very short verse, but very powerful verse at the same time, because Peter doesn't, I'm going to just make sure I got that complete. Honor all people, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. That's a very short command, right? But man, it means so much. Honor all people, even the ones that mistreat me, yes. That's what he's talking about. Honor all people. What about if I'm being treated unfairly? Or what if there's people who are not really honorable? Yes. It's very short, but respect. Respect is a huge part of a Christian peacemaker. I'll tell you one other aspect of this too. You're not going to be respected by others to solve their problems if you don't respect them, right? You have to respect others. That's a huge part. And self-control. James talks about self-control in the tongue. You've got James chapter 3, verse 5 and 6. I'll read that real quick. James 3, 5 and 6. Very, very familiar. Even so, the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. See how great a forest a little fire kindles. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. The tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of nature and is set on fire by hell. Strong statements, right? And sometimes we don't get what our words can do we? Sometimes we don't see how a little thing that we say can start off so much. That's the image that James is trying to give you, is that what you say, even the littlest thing, especially what I'm going to talk about in our long-term relationships, in your long-term relationships, that comment you make to a spouse, that comment that you make to a child that doesn't necessarily mean so much to you, can be the thing that they remember forever, right? That they never forget. I'm going to try to go real quickly through here. Scott, I think she had a comment.
I want to say a comment about saying things. Some of this could fit me, I guess. You don't know what you say until you say it. And then you wonder, why did I say that? And the next thing is, am I going to get forgiven for saying that? Because I knew better. I shouldn't have said that. But out it came.
Yep.
You don't even know the meaning of sometimes what you are saying until you hear it from your own voice.
Yep.
And you say, why did I say that?
Well, and a big part of the impact of our speech being unexpected is that we don't know each other's hearts, do we? That's what Paul says in 1 Corinthians. No one knows the heart of a man except the spirit that is in him, right? And so I can say something to someone else, and it can go against everything that they've lived their whole life for, and their heart is just dead set against it, and I didn't know. Why? Because I can't know somebody else's heart. So what God tells us to do to solve that problem is to be very careful about what you say, right? And respect it, not just say, well, hey, like what we kind of make a joke in the software engineering world. I think we got somebody over there. The software engineering world, software engineering world is not like Neil Booth's world, okay? In Neil Booth's world of construction, there's only so many bricks, so many pipes, so many wires. In software engineering, you can't run out of words that you write your code in. It's just infinite, And so your decision making becomes something more like, yes, everything is possible. Some things are expensive, Let's not do everything that we possibly could, but let's use judicious judgment about which features we build into our software. Not because we're going to run out of materials, because the raw materials for code is just words, but because we have to make sure that we're building the right thing for the right reason. But yeah, the words can have such a strong impact. Yeah, Bertha.
I taught 35 and a half years and substituted 14 more. During that last 14 years, I caused a big conflict in a class. some student came in and asked a question and wanted to talk to somebody, and he wasn't speaking English. And so I asked, what language is that? That class erupted in the worst screaming arguments I've ever heard. And I never did get to the bottom of what language it was, except I guessed that it was Haitian. And that's what had caused the conflict. But
Okay.
I could have kept my mouth shut and not asked.
Well, you have to get to the bottom of it, because as a teacher, you have to communicate with your students. But man, it can be hard sometimes. That's so many things change generationally between people. Cultures change, backgrounds change, generations, age change. Causes you almost have to relearn how you talk with every new situation or every division. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, you said that scripture is Proverbs 22:3, but are you sure? Unless I got something wrong.
Let me see.
It was James? Okay, thank you. Proverbs 21:23. Okay, thank you.
Oops. 21, 23. I forgot a 1 right in the middle there. Yeah, Calvin had something.
I'm going to try to tie this respect to what we were talking about sobriety as well. I had an uncle who became an alcoholic because of his troubles in combat during World War II. It just literally drove him to drink. He saw a cousin step on a landmine right in front of him. That could cause almost anyone to drink. But coming forward, when I was about 12, 14 years old, my uncle would come over to the house, and his brothers would be there, my other uncles, and my mother, who was his big sister. But my other uncles would always put him down because of his drinking, and even start yelling and screaming at him, like, why don't you just leave, and that kind of thing. Very disrespectful to him. And I loved my uncle because he loved me. He was the one that taught me how to go fishing and how to fish. And he was very poor. And I remember in college needing a calculator. And the calculator was extremely expensive. I mean, way back then it was over $100. My uncle gave me that $100 in cash for Christmas. He said, Calvin, I want you to succeed. And I took a interest in helping him.
Yep.
And I showed him how alcohol was going to ruin his life before it did.
Okay.
I told him what would happen and so forth. And years later, he started seeing the things that I told him were going to happen, like ruining his liver and depression, and he almost committed suicide. And then he came to me after that and said, Calvin, you told me this. I'm never going to drink again. And he didn't. But it was because I showed him love and respect. And that's why he quit.
Yep. That's a great story about peacemaking, because it's a difficult story, right? Like, I'm sure that people were being mean to your uncle, not only because of like the drinking, but because of things he had done to them. And so there's a whole history there that has to be overcome among people, betraying trust, things like that. That's usually your peacemaking situations. They're usually not easy. They're not straightforward. There's things that have to be overcome. There's challenges, like the problems within problems to resolve, right? That's a great situation, a great example. People that I deal with in the jail all the time, it's really hard to get anybody to admit that they're addicted to anything, okay? There's tons of these surveys where people go out on the street and just try to understand addiction, try to get numbers and all that, give them $50 gift card or something if they'll answer questions. And about 90% of them that will answer the questions like this, have you used 6 or 7 more times today? Have you ever lied to your family members and destroyed relationships because of this drug? Have you ever stolen to support this habit? Has it cost you a job or your house or anything like that? They will answer yes to all of those questions, and 90% of them will still say, no, I'm not addicted to this drug, okay? So there's substances can have real self-deluding effects. Like you don't understand what you're doing, or you do, but you don't understand what you're doing. But yeah, they cause, like, now you start thinking about all the things that you got to unwrap to get out of that, right? You have to restore trust with your family members. You have to restore trust in a workplace to show people that you can be trusted again. You have to restore your own health, right? And your body has to get right somehow. You have to try as far as you can to mend relationships with people that you have hurt before in the past to get out of that. Just so much stuff that you have to unwind to fix that situation. It just stacks and stacks and stacks, and it's problem after problem after problem. You're really having it's really a perfect example of peacemaking, and it's something that happens a lot more today. Than you would really think. Synthetic drugs, I didn't even need to talk about that one. Okay, here's my last one. We only have a couple of minutes left. I think this one is going to get to what she was talking about, discretion. Whoever covers an offense seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates close friends. Proverbs 17:9. Discretion, a really important part of Christian peacemaking. We kind of covered this. You have to be trusted to keep secrets. You have to be trusted to not blab people's problems all over the place. But this is kind of interesting because, sometimes there's problems that you think you should tell other people about. And you have to decide when that line is, when something gets to be serious enough that people need to know. But I thought this was really interesting because this is also kind of like a Christian way to deal with sin, right? Where we are told to confess sin to one to another. You can only do that with somebody that you know is not going to go out and tell everybody that sin that you just confessed to them, right? That's not something that you could just do with somebody who has a problem with discretion. But yeah, whoever covers an offense seeks love. There's other verses that talk about this, but yeah, discretion is a really important part to indirectly avoid conflict. Think about it, this covers gossip, obviously. Whether gossip is true can still be gossip. But yeah, discretion is something that is a strong technique in the Christian peacemakers, arsenal. That we have to be somebody who can be trusted with their secrets. And so you can see that a Christian peacemaker has to have relationships with people because they have to know ahead of time. Like, you have to have built this up with someone over a long period of time. Another great reason for us to get closer together with each other, do more things socially, you're probably going to be able to get involved in someone else's problems better as a peacemaker or solve your own, the stronger relationship you have with them. And that's not just seeing somebody at church all the time, but that's being out with them, that's helping them with lawn work at their house, different things, the ways that we can be in each other's lives, build up the trust that we need to be discreet in handling our issues like this. Okay, thank you all for coming. We'll talk about dealing with conflict